All right. Well, why don't we get started? Good evening, everybody. My name's David DeMont. I'm with Samy's Camera. Thanks for joining us tonight on our Samy's PhotoSchool Holiday Education event. We are very excited tonight to be partnering again with our friends from Sony, who are bringing in Scott Robert Lim. What a guy. What photographer extraordinaire, great guy, and an incredible presenter. So tonight, Scott's going to be talking about lighting, using one light in particular, workflows, answering lots of your questions, and probably covering a lot of other things as well, as he always does. Before we start, though, that's right. Before we start, though, I just want to remind everybody, Samy's Camera is open. We are open in stores following social distancing protocols. We have touchless curbside pickup if you prefer that, or we are 24/7 at samys.com, shipping directly to your home for all your holiday needs. So any way you want to shop, we're available. Online tonight, we have Joshua and Marcus from Sony who will be answering your questions. So please use the chat feature. At the end, they'll be feeding them to Scott to answer if he hasn't covered them during the presentation. We also have some special bonuses and extra savings to talk about for participating tonight. You'll learn about a little later on from Marcus. And with that, I will turn it over to Scott Robert Lim and take it away.
Thanks, everybody. I'm glad that you're here, and it looks like, man, we got a great turnout. We're hitting 92. Let's get to 100. Tell your friends. But anyways, thank you to Samys who is having me here, and I am going to share with you my magic formula on how I make one light look amazing. And you'll see, I don't know if you ever see any of my photos, but I use this technique probably on a good majority of the, I would say 70 to 80% of the photos that you see, portraits, I am using this technique. So I can't wait to share it with you. So let's get going. I got a nice lecture that I prepared for you. And let's get on it here. If I can do my technology right, I think we're good. All right, so let's hit my screen here. How's that for everybody? Let me turn this chat down. How do I get to that? I want to get my little, oh, sorry. I'm going to have to get out of this mode so I can reduce the, so I don't want to see my ugly face there, so I can just get maximum screen. Okay, perfect. So let's talk about mastering one light. And if you could master one light, and this is what I tell people, if you can get and master one light and understand.
No audio, Scott.
You muted yourself, Scott.
Yeah, you muted yourself.
Am I good now?
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay, so if you could master one light and learn how to control it, know how to get the shadows and the shading or no shadows and do all that kind of stuff with just one light, then you can master 100 lights. But what happens is, here's a common mistake amongst photographers, not you guys, because you're brilliant. Let's talk about the other photographers in the country. What happens is they kind of know one light, and then they try to start adding 2 lights and 3 lights and gels and stuff when they really haven't mastered one light, and then they're just kind of lost, and then their work kind of becomes hit and miss, you know. And so, but if you get one down, you can get 100 down, and then you're off to the races. So let's get going. So let's see here. I'm trying to get to the next slide. Okay, so basically there's 4 fundamental skills for you to be really good. You have to know composition, you have to know posing, you have to know post-processing, and you have to know lighting, which we're going to talk a little bit about today. And lighting can be kind of categorized as there's natural light, which is a talk for another day. There's constant light, like a video light that you can use. And then there is flash and strobe, which is the most difficult, okay? And then there's portable flash, right? Portable light that you can bring with you, that you don't have to plug into the wall, that's battery operated, and you have a manual system, you have a TTL system, you have high-speed sync, all those different things. And then you have on location flash, which can be, studio, which can be plugged in or can be portable, but and in studio. But what I'm going to talk about today, which is going to be the hardest of all of them, which is on location flash. And if you could master on location flash, you can pretty much do the rest of this stuff. So I don't have a whole lot of time, so I'm going to teach you the hardest, and then the other stuff you can kind of fill in the blanks. Okay, so let's talk about gear just a little bit. And what's the difference between studio lights in studio, the kind that you plug into the wall and stuff like that, and on location? Well, studio lights are big, bulky, very, very powerful. You could put them on full power and it can recycle real fast. If you're taking a bunch of pictures in a row, because it's plugged in and it has plenty of juice, it can just fire and fire. And so a lot of times that's why studio people have these big lights, because you can just have a lot of juice to them. You don't have to worry about recycle time or anything like that. Usually anywhere from 400 watts to 800 watts is the standard. And it uses a manual system. So studio lights are pretty much all manual because it's very, very accurate, and you want to be able to control your lighting. And so that's why they're manual. Now, then they have on location, and this is like a standard flash, right? And Samy's has tons of different types of standard flashes that they have. And they'd be happy to show you and guide you in which one works best for you. And so these are really designed to match the strength of the sun at full.
Scott, you're muted again.
Yeah. You're muting yourself.
Still muted.
Yeah. Some reason it starts to mute me. Is somebody's like, is there somebody accidentally pushing a button? Anyways, I see it when it's unmuting, but I'm not even touching anything. So we'll pray for the best right now. Okay, so a small flash is designed to match the strength of a sun at 6 feet away with no diffusion at all. That's all it's designed to do. Okay. And so what's great about it, it's small, it's portable, adequate power for the most part, it's battery operated, and it's measured not by watts, but measured by guide numbers, which we won't really get into. And it uses, there's many different types of these small different flashes, which we'll get into. And I'll talk about a little bit later. Now, what's new, within the last 3 years, they've had these hybrid strobes where they're both kind of like portable, but then you could use them in the studio too. And they have a little bit higher wattage. They go from anywhere from say 200 to 600 watts, which are great, which a 200 watt flash is probably 2 to 3 times standard flashes. So if you put 2 or 3 of those small flashes together, that's what would be a 200 watt flash. Sometimes I go outdoors and use a 600 watt flash, which I love. It just has so much power, but they're big, heavy, and bulkier at that point. And you probably have to have an assistant to really do that, to use that. But again, Samy's has plenty of these too. They'd be happy to show you and guide you. Okay, diffusers, I pretty much use either a softbox and an umbrella mount. And what I like to do is use mounts that I can put the flash inside it, and then around the outside, it has a Bowens mount. Bowens mount is the most popular mount for softboxes. And so I always look for Bowens mount. So if all your soft boxes are Bowens mount, then they match to everything that you use. And so that's why I like using Bowens, because it standardizes it. Also, if something has an umbrella mount where you can just slide an umbrella into that's quick and easy. And so if I'm shooting in the streets of Paris or something like that, I don't necessarily want to walk around the subway station with a big old softbox and stuff like that. So usually I just bring in an umbrella so I can open and close it real fast. And so it's not, doesn't give yourself away like, oh, look at that professional photographer over there, shut him down, right? Never go to Matador Beach with the softbox or Santa Monica Pier. That's, don't do that. Okay, so let's getting set up with off-camera flash. What is off-camera flash, and why not just put the flash on the camera? You know, it's like they have a hot shoe there, and if you need more light, just put the darn flash on the camera and make life easy for you, right? Why do you have to have it off the camera? Okay, well, the reason why you want to have it off the camera, which I'll explain a little bit later, is that it will mimic the sun, because the sun is one off-camera light, and you can make your lighting look very natural. And a lot of times when you use that on-camera flash, you get that flashy feel. It looks like you used a flash, right? It doesn't look natural, doesn't look soft, right? And so when you're using off-camera flash, you can get those effects. So basically, when people talk about using one light, they're typically talking about off camera, putting the one light off the camera to simulate the sun or simulate where you can create shadows, right? So how it usually works, especially in a small flash, they have a receiver built into the flash, and they have what they call a transmitter that hooks up onto your camera. So when you push your shutter down, it activates a signal, and the transmitter transmits the signal, which is received inside the flash, and it fires, okay? So that's a basic transmitter and receiver. In the old days, the old flashes didn't have the transmitter built into the flash, and so they had things like pocket wizards and things like that, which they still use, which is a separate receiver that they attached to the flash. But nowadays they're built inside, which makes it a lot easier. Okay, so here are the 4 different types. This is why it gets so confusing. There's 4 different flash systems. There's a completely manual flash system. And the difference with this first system here is that you have to make sure that you use a shutter speed 1/200th of a second or slower. Okay, and then there's the manual flash system with high-speed sync, where you could use any shutter speed and it'll still work. Then you have what they call TTL and manual, which means TTL is that the flash can figure out the light for you, just like putting your camera in program mode. You know, it'll just make an approximation for you, and usually it's correct, but sometimes it's wrong too. And so, and that's a basic TTL system, but you still have to have your shutter speed below 1/200th of a second for it to work. Now, the new flashes, so when you go into Samy's camera and they're going to sell you a flash, I would say 90% of these small portable flashes is this last category, where they're TTL, they can also do manual, and they have high speed sync. That's the kind of flash that I particularly use. In general though, I don't use TTL a lot. I just have make sure I have a manual flash, but it also has high speed sync, because I like to shoot at high shutter speeds, because when I'm in bright light, I want to have my f-stop down to 1.8 and low like that. And so if you're in bright light and you put your f-stop down at 1.8 and you want to create that blurry background, you're going to have your shutter speed way up high, probably around 6400th of a second, maybe even 8000th of a second, depending on your f-stop, in order so you don't blow out the sky, because the sun is so bright. That's why you like high speed sync, so you can shoot shallow depth of field in bright light. Okay, so basically the more options that a flash has, the more complicated it is. And so this is the reason why it's so difficult. let me show you the simple versus the complicated in regards to a flash system, okay? So here's just a basic flash. Look at all the darn things on that LCD panel that's on there, okay? Now I'm gonna show you what you have to do just to get the flash to fire, okay? So you know what's great? This is the reason why I love camera stores, is that they can actually kind of guide you through these things too, if they happen to know your camera and things like that. Whereas, you know, you buy off of the internet somewhere, you're not going to get the personal attention, and they can kind of help you with these things like that. But let's go to a standard TTL flash. What are all the things that need to get set up? First of all, you have to tell it, do you want it to be a master or a slave? Master means I'm going to put that on top of my camera, and I'm going to control another flash that's off camera, and it's the master, right? Or are you going to say, am I going to be the slave that's going to be controlled by another transmitter? And you have to tell the flash to do that, and you have to know where it is. Right there, it can take a half an hour just trying to go through the manual and figure out how to do that, okay? And then they have different modes. Do you want to shoot this in manual? Do you want to shoot it in TTL? Do you want high-speed sync collected? Or maybe, you know, in multi-mode, it will fire like multiple times per second. And you got to know that, because sometimes you hit that mode by accident, you don't know how to get out of it, right? And then they even have some things like ratio, where it will automatically, if you're using more than one flash, it'll do a 3-to-1 ratio, 2-to-1 or whatever. And it'll also do that too. So, which is kind of rare, but you have to know how to do that. Then on top of that, you have to tell, well, how do you want to trigger that flash? Do you want to trigger it by a Wi-Fi signal, like a radio signal? Or do you want it to go off when it just sees another flash firing, right? And so there's two different ways. Now, wouldn't you always want it in radio to have it go off in the radio mode, right? Well, there's often times when you're using different brands of flashes, and maybe you don't, you know, the transmitters is a different brand than the flash that you're using. But if you say, oh, well, you know what, when it sees another flash go off, I'm just going to have this go off too, and I won't really need a transmitter with it. It just needs to see another flash. And so that's why they have that mode, that slave mode, because that's important too, just in case you're mixing brands, you have that option. Okay, so you have to know that. Then on top of that, you have to designate a channel for it, right? They have usually, like a typical flash has anywhere from 1 to 16 channels, or maybe even 32 channels, right? And why would you want different channels? Well, let's say I am shooting next to another person, and we want to be able to control different flashes, right? I have to be on channel 1, the other person has to be on channel 2, or else I may fire his flashes if we're on the same channel, or vice versa. Then on top of that, there's groups. Maybe you have several flashes that you want to control in that channel. So I'm on channel 1, but I want to control 3 flashes. Well, each flash has to be named a group. Flash A might be in full power, flash B might be in quarter power, and flash C might be on full power. I don't know, you can control those different things, but that's how you have to designate it. Now, on top of that, they also have a zoom feature where you can kind of make your flash zoom and narrow its beam, right? And if you usually, I like to set it at 35 millimeters because that's the standard spread. But if you accidentally hit a button and you make it go at 200 millimeters, that beam is going to be very narrow. And let's say you're shooting a large family group of 30 people, you don't want it at 200 millimeters, because you're just probably going to fire, you know, the first 5 people that the flash sees, because it's so narrow. So you have to make sure that the zoom is set correctly, either wide or narrow, and that also affects the power. The more millimeters that you have, if you happen to put it on 200 millimeters, it's actually going to be a lot stronger than if you put it on 24 millimeters wider. Okay. So then after that, they have all the custom functions like, oh, do you want this, light to go on when you click it in the dark? Do you want the light on the display to stay on for 30 seconds or 10 seconds and all this? Do you want it to beep when it flashes and all these different things? But if you happen to get into that mode, do you know how to get out of it? Right? Or if you want to, let's say you're doing something and you don't want your flash to beep. Do you know how to go in there and turn the beep off? Right? All these different things. And, if they're sending an infrared to help focusing, you could turn on off this. Oh, there's all these custom functions that you can do. That's just the flash. Now the flash has to work with the transmitter, right? So you have to match the channel and you have to match the group to the flash, right? So if your flash is on channel 1, your transmitter has to also be on channel 1, and then it can individually control the power of all those different flashes within that channel. And you have to do that, okay? Now, that is a lot. And so what I say about flash, if you're going to use flash, you have to use it every single week for a whole year to really feel comfortable using it. Because let's say you go to one workshop and they show you how to use your flash and you don't pick it up for a month later, you're going to forget certain things. And so you're going to look in your bag and maybe you're going to need that flash to use it, but you go, man, I haven't used that flash in a month and there's all these settings. I don't want to even use it. I don't want to even take it out of the bag, right? And so I have a saying, if you can't set it up and use it within seconds, you will never use it. Whatever it is, whether it's a softbox, whether it's a gel, whether it's whatever, if you can't set it up within seconds, you're never going to use it. So that's why you've got to practice this stuff, okay? So if you're just beginning with flash, I recommend going to a basic manual system because it's a lot easier. And you might not have some of the features as a newer flash, but it can just get you going, because here's what you do on a manual flash. You set it up on whether you want it Wi-Fi or slave, then you set the channel, and then you set the power on the flash. That's it. Then you have your transmitter, and the transmitter just has to be the same channel as the flash. And a lot of times they're just a configuration of a DIP switch or something like that. And so once you set the channel up, you're good to go. And then you don't control the flash power in the transmitter. You just control it straight on the flash. And believe it or not, sometimes that's a lot easier, because if you hit one button wrong and you've got all these different dials and things on your transmitter, and if you don't understand it correctly, then it's going to fluster you during your shoot. And so what I kind of recommend for people is like, get a basic manual system, get comfortable with it. Then once you can master that, then maybe go up to the other systems, which you have more control. So more features is not necessarily better, because it can confuse you. Okay. So anyways, so this is basically how it works. You have a transmitter, and then you have channel 1. Let's say I'm channel 1. I can control all those flashes within a 300-foot range. Then let's say my buddy Marcus is shooting with me and he wants to use flash 2. He would be on channel 2 and he can control all his flashes, even though we could be standing right next to each other. Okay. And so we could be standing right next to each other. We could actually be shooting the same model, but I could control my flashes and he can control his flashes totally independently. And that's basically how it works. Okay, and there's a transmitter there. So this is just showing that you don't have to be in different areas. You can be all in the same area, but you can control it together depending on what channel that you want to be with. Okay, so this is a manual system where you have a channel and a transmitter, and that's it. And you control the flash power itself. And see how easy that is? You just make sure the channel and the transmitter is matched, and then you control the flash. You go over to the flash and say, I want a quarter power, I want a half power, I want it whatever. And then it makes it a lot easier that way. And then if you change to channel 2, then you can control all those other flashes that are on channel 2. Okay, so anyways, that's the technical part, and that is the skinny on if you want to get started with flash. You're going to have to know all that stuff. I highly recommend, if you want to do it, you got to practice every single week for a year so you can feel comfortable with everything. Okay, how to create amazing light with off-camera flash. So let me get into why you actually need to create your light and have it off camera. One, because when the light is off camera, it creates shadows. Now, I don't know if you can see my little profile pic. I'm going to turn off one of the lights and I'm going to have one off camera flash. And you can see now that now you see the shadows, right? Because why? That one light is off camera and you can control shadows with the light. And so why do you want to show shadows? Because you want to show shape. You want to show the shape of your subject off. You want to show texture off. And you want to be able to create that light that is whether soft or hard. And I'll get into a little bit what that means, right? And then sometimes, because a flash is so powerful, you could actually create a darker ambient light situation and create more mood. And you can make something look like it's in nighttime when it's basically in a brightly lit room, because you can, the flash is so powerful, you can lower your ambient light in your camera and create these cool lighting effects, which I'll show you a little bit later. Here's a cool thing, is adding a catch light. So when you have a flash, you can add a catch light, and that's the magic to any portrait. For me, if there's no catch light, there's no portrait. Okay, here's another great thing about lighting is post-processing comes alive when there's good lighting. When you have good lighting in your subject, it's so easy to post-process and make it look great because you have highlight and shadow. Highlight and shadow is one of the great things that you should have in your photos that produce that wow factor, is when you have that highlight in the shadow. Even landscape photographers know this, right? Because they like to shoot when those shadows are long across the landscape so they can get those great highlights and shadows. Highlights and shadows create great images, and your one light will enable you to create highlight and shadow, and that's why you want to do it. So look at this example here, right? This was actually in an overcast situation, but do you see the highlight and shadow on the cactus? And do you see the highlight and shadow on the subject? Now, if you were, I think a couple of years ago, you know, I did this mentoring series with Samys, and this is when I was in the Orange County store there. We went out and did this particular shot here. So this is with a Samy's event here. Okay. And so you look at the highlight and shadow on her face. Look at the highlight and shadow on her body. Without that shadow, I can't accentuate her shape. So this was created with just one off-camera light, off to camera right, but it creates the texture and the highlight and shadow. And so here again, you're creating drama because why? It's not evenly lit. There's highlight and shadow. There's shadows actually made by the light source, which creates that mystery and that drama. And I love that look. And so you can only do this when you learn how to create your own light, and you could create your shadows at any time like this. So here's another reason why you want to use a flash, because you might want to create a darker ambient light. So here I am without using a flash with this photo on the left. I'm here in Hawaii. And because the light is bright, the sun is shining against the background. So the sun is actually behind her. So she's actually dark, right? She's in shadow because the sun is behind her. So for me to have her look properly exposed, I have to increase my exposure because she's in shadow because the sun is behind her. But what happens when I make her properly exposed? My background is all blown out. So if I could match the light that's in the background, that's very bright on her. So if I use the same intensity of light, I can get a photo more like this, and I can get a beautiful catch light in the eye. So I'll teach you how to do this a little bit later. But here's another powerful effect that you can use with flash. So here's the tip number one. This is not my magic formula, but this is a very huge tip. You need to set your background first, okay? And then add your flash or light to your subject. So I'm talking about on location. So no matter what it is, you set the background first. So let's go back to this photo here. Well, let's go to the next photo because I actually demonstrate that. Okay, look, here we are. So here again, I'm in Hawaii. And what did I do? I set the background first. Now, it's very bright because if you look at the camera settings, I'm at 1.4 at 3200th of a second, right? And it's actually ISO 50. So it's very, very bright out. And I actually underexposed the background just a little bit. And this is a technique that a lot of people who use flash do. They slightly underexpose the background. Why would you want to underexpose the background? That doesn't make sense. Well, if I correctly expose the subject and my background is slightly underexposed, what's brighter? This rule, right? What I go to? Your eye goes to what's brightest and what's sharpest. And so if I make my subject brighter than the background, then it's going to stick out more. And so you're ready to see what I did? Boom. There it is, right? And so don't you notice that she's brighter than the background, even though it is a super, super sunny time right now? It's very hot and the sun is very bright at there, but because I underexposed the background, it doesn't look super, super bright. And then I added a lot of flash power on the subject. So how do you do that? You set your background first. Now, when you're outdoors, now you got to realize that a video light cannot light this because a video light is not enough to give you this much light. So that's why I'm teaching you how to use, if I were to just teach you how to use one light, I would rather teach you flash first because you can use flash for almost everything in every situation. But if I teach you video light, then you're not going to be able to do things like this because it's not powerful enough. In general, a video light is 1/100th the power of a flash, and that's even just a standard flash. So if you got a standard video light that's about this big, it's 1/100th the power of a small little flash, okay? And so you have to remember that. Okay, here's another situation. I'm at the Sony store here, and I'm gonna do this shot, and look at all that background that's cluttered, and I just want to take a picture of my subjects. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to underexpose my background a lot. So when I take a picture without the flash, it looks completely black. Okay, that's how far I'm underexposing it. And then I'm seeing that camera setting and seeing what light I need on my subject. And so if I just fire that light on my subject, the background will be completely black. So you won't see any of that garbage, not garbage, but all that stuff behind, and you'll just focus your eye on your subject. And that's what I did. And so this is another thing, powerful thing that you can do with flash that you can't do it with video light. Okay, it's impossible to do this type of look with the video light because the flash is so strong. You can underexpose your exposure and knock out everything that flash doesn't fire on. Okay, here's another reason why here's a famous picture that I take. Oh, man, I must have took this about 10 years ago, but this has been seen all over the world, really. And even in Hawaii, people copy this and other businesses use it. And people tell me they see it in the newspaper in Hawaii and everything. Hey, Scott, somebody's using your photo over here, right? And I'm like, okay, whatever, right? And so look at that catch light it's added right into the eye there. Okay, that's the magic of the portrait. Look at that catch light right there. That was added by one light only. Okay, here's another. And so you can see post-processing comes alive when you have good lighting, right? And this is just with one light behind the subject. Okay, and then look at the post-processing that you can do with that one. Why? Because you have highlight and shadow. Once you have highlight and shadow, that's when all the magic begins. Okay, and so that's why you want to learn how to use lighting. That's why you want to go to Samy's, especially because they're going to have some specials, right? Buy some cameras, buy some lighting, because you want to be able to create highlight in shadow to create these interesting images. Okay, so the question is, when you go to Samy's this week, should I just buy, one standard flash? Is that good enough? Or do I need to, fill my basket up with more stuff, right? Is one flash good enough? Now, this is the reason why this is all about the basics. If you don't know what one flash can do, and this is my problem in the beginning when learning photography, I would just buy whatever looks good, right? I would see some photographer use that. Oh, wow, I like that imagery, buy that, right? Oh, I like this, oh, buy that. And then later as I started accumulating and buying and going into more and more debt because I would just buy everything, I said, let me just back this up. Like, what's the bare minimum that I actually need? And so I started studying this, right? And then I figured out a lot of things. And I did this whole lecture series, Crazy Stupid Light, which talks about this. But let's go into this a little bit, right? So let me show you all the light. So what I'm going to do is show you all the lighting situations in the entire world when you're outdoors. Isn't that amazing? Anywhere you go in the world, you will encounter these lighting situations. And if you understand these, you can see how much light is needed. So the brightest situation, right? Because generally the sun is the same distance from the earth, no matter where you are, right? And so when you have a very bright day, right, what they call is a sunny 16 situation. So if you're outdoors and you see super sharp shadows on the ground, then you're in the brightest light situation that you'll ever be in. And that's called f16, meaning if you set your f-stop to 16 and you match your ISO with your shutter speed, you will get a correct exposure. And you could just look out, you could try this, right? So you just look on the ground. If you see super sharp shadows on the ground, you set it to f16, 100, 100, I guarantee you'd be pretty close, right on with your exposure, right? Now that doesn't mean you have to shoot at f16. That just means that that's the amount of light. If you're shooting at f2 in this thing, your shutter speed would be all the way up to 6400. And so that's why a lot of times when I'm shooting outdoors and I know it's bright light, I set my ISO to 50 because a lot of times you could only go up to 8 thousandths of a second on your shutter speed. And I don't want to run out of shutter speed. And so if I set it to ISO 50, now I have more leadway in my shutter to make a darker background. Now that's the brightest situation. Now, if you half that light, you get f11. And what does that look like? That looks like softly, the shadows are a little bit soft on the edges, right? And then what's half of that light? Half of that light is f8, which means it's overcast. So you see barely any shadows or hardly no shadows at all. So when you go on an overcast day and you don't see any shadows outside, you're at f8. And these are the camera situations that you're in there. Now, if you half that light, what is that? That's like being in the shade. So if you're in a sunny day and you go into the shade, you're at f5.6. Now, you might think that this is crazy, but if you test this out and you actually do it, you will, because in the old days, they didn't have sophisticated camera meters. They would have to go out and just look at the sky and the situation, and they just have to, put the camera settings in their camera without a meter. And they used to take great pictures, and you can do it too by following these rules. Then you're in dark shade, meaning let's say you're in the shade, but then, the sun is not super, super bright. Maybe there's like, partially cloudy or something like that. Then it's darker That's what F4 is. Then when you're getting to twilight, maybe when that sun is just about to going down below the horizon, it's getting very dark here at 2.8. And then when you're at nighttime, when the sun goes below the horizon, then that's when you're going to be at this situation. So those are all the lighting situations there are. And so what I did was I created this chart. So I go, well, these are all the lighting situations. Let me just figure out, this one little chart is literally hundreds of thousands of people, maybe even 1 million people have this chart. And this is how I kind of got famous, is this chart. And so don't worry, I can get one. I'll flash my email down you. I'll send you this whole entire page so you can have it, right? I'll just make a JPEG out of it. Okay, so look at the brightest light situation right here. So if my small little flash can handle this situation, then it can handle everything else. So my small little flash, let's go to F16. It's at full power at 6 feet away. Now, let's say you have to have your light more than 6 feet away from your subject. You will be underpowered and it won't work. Let's say you have to be at 6 feet, but you want to put a softbox on. There's no way one flash will work. So the only way that your one small standard flash will work is if you can be 6 feet from your subject and use straight flash without a diffuser. If you put a single diffuser on it, then you got to be 3 feet, at least 3, the light has to be 3 feet from your subject, okay? And that's what one small flash can do. If you have to do more than that, it won't work, okay? But other than that, if you're not shooting in bright light a lot, then one flash can easily handle all the rest. Because if you look at, like if you go to, like I'm shooting in the shade in bright light, my one standard flash at 6 feet away would be at 1/8 power. And so even if I put a diffuser on it, you know, I'll be 2 stops higher, I'll be at half power, I still can get away with it, right? So generally, if you're shooting in bright light, you're gonna need at least one flash. So I would say now this is just my thing. Now I have a lot of stuff, I buy a lot, right? But as a bare minimum, I would say you at least need at least 2 small flashes and a video light to handle everything, okay? So, that's just because, you know, you're very limited to 6 feet. And if you can have another flash and you got to shoot a big group or something, a lot of times your light has to be more than 6 feet away. And if you have a larger group, then you need more coverage. So generally 2 flashes at least and a video light would work for you, okay? All right, so if you email me at scottrobertlim@gmail.com, I will take this whole page, I will make a JPEG out of it, and I will send it to you so you know the lighting situations and you have the chart and all that kind of stuff. And so you can study that, practice with it. So let's go back to our situation here, right? So here we are, we're at a F16 lighting situation, and that light in the background is dark, but I underexposed it a bit, even though it's bright. Right? And so that's very, very bright in the background, but because the sun is behind her, she's in shade. And so for me to get a good picture, I have to put the same amount of light. So I need a tremendous amount of light needed to match the background exposure back there. And so have you ever heard this term, overpowering the sun? Because if I'm underexposing my background, my light on my subject has to be brighter on the subject than my background, and I have to overpower the sun. And so you need enough juice to do that. So if that is F16, that light in your back on the sky, the sun is shining brightly on that sky at F16. I need to put F16 worth of light on my subject, right? Which, here we are, here is at full power. So if you have one standard small flash and you put it with an umbrella, which I did here, you're going to have to be 3 feet next to your subject. Now, if I use the standard flash without an umbrella, I could go 6 feet away, and that would give me enough power to do this type of shot. Okay, so that's what overpowering the sun is with one light. Okay, so now let's look at a completely different situation where I'm down here at the bottom, right? The sun is below the horizon. And if you look at my chart, you're going to see how much flash power do I need. If I'm shooting at f2 at ISO 100, I only need 1/64th power. Or if I turn my ISO to 200, all I need is 1/28th power. And in fact, if I turn my ISO to 800, because maybe I want to raise my shutter speed up, my flash doesn't even go down low enough to create that type of light. So that's why I use a video light when I just need a small amount of light. And so here's my basic rule. Remember this: when the sun goes below the horizon, I go to video light, because I just need a small amount of light, because that light, so I'm setting my background first in this shot. What am I setting my background to? Those lights behind him. Okay, so I set my exposure to the lights behind him. This is completely at night, so he's not even lit. He's lit only by my video light through an umbrella that I'm using. So he's completely dark at that point, right? But I set my background exposure, I turn my video light on, I put it through an umbrella, and then I light my subject to match. I just need a little bit of light because that light behind him is very, very little, right? So it's the same. It's not like the sun. It's just like these little light bulbs. That's all the light it's putting out. So if there's a little bit of light in the background, I just need a little bit of light on my subject, and it matches, okay? So that's the light power that you have to understand this before you get into lighting and flash. You have to know the relative strengths that you need in order for you to be successful at it. Okay, so there's two types of light. There's soft light and hard light. And let's talk about those, because they create different effects. And so if you're going to just use one light, you're going to need to know how to use these different effects. Okay, so there's three essential questions. What does hard light look like? How do you create it? And when do you create it? So let's do the first thing. What does hard light look like? It looks like sharp shadows. So when you're out in the open, bright light situation like you're here, and you can see the sun shining behind her, it's creating a super sharp shadow. Look at the heel on her shoes. Isn't that shadow sharp? When you see a shadow like that, you are in hard light. Okay, here I am. Where are we, folks? We're in San Miguel here, right? Does anybody remember going here? Maybe that's in our class there that was here during this shot. Okay, and if you were here, you're going to remember how terribly hot it was at this time shooting. We were all sweating, right? So look at the sharp shadows that they were creating here, right? They're very sharp. This is a bright light situation. This is hard light situation here, okay? And so you're in a hard light situation. So when you're in a hard light situation and you put hard light on your subject, you're going to have a hard contrast line between the highlight and the shadow. And that's when you know that you're using hard light, is when you see shadows and they have that hard line there. Okay, so how do you create hard light? Well, you have to have a small light source, and also distance is a factor. Now, let me ask you a question. Who can answer this for me? Does the sun create hard or soft light? Now, how big is the sun? Now, the sun is the biggest light source in the freaking universe. So you can't say that it's small. It's huge. And so if you say, well, yeah, it's huge, but does it create soft light or hard light? It creates hard light, but it's a huge size. It's because distance comes into factor. So how you measure whether or not something's going to produce hard light or soft light, what you do is you look at the light source and you measure how big it is with your little fingers. And so if I want you to imagine stepping outside right now and it's a sunny day and you look out onto the sun and you actually measure it with your fingers, right? You're going to get like a small little teeny weeny size like this, right? And so whenever the light source is created and you're just like, you know, a couple centimeters apart, your fingers are, and measuring the size of the light, that's going to create hard light and sharp shadow. So it's not just about size. You have to remember it's about distance too. Okay, so that's what creates hard light, is a small light source, and something that's farther away produces that sharp light. So when do you want to use it? Well, a lot of times, now here, this subject, we were in Italy here, and we were in this place that had a whole bunch of buildings and things, which were bright colors, and she was wearing yellow, and I go, oh, I want to do this fun shot, and I want to simulate the sun, even though we're not in the sun, we're in pure shade. So what did I do? I want to shoot create these vibrant, sharp colors. I produce hard light. I have one flash off to the side, up high, giving me a shadow like it's the sun. And when I want to use vibrant colors, hard light works great. Okay, vibrant colors, hard light here. Okay, here's another hard light situation. Vibrant colors. You see a nice, beautiful blue sky. It's okay to use hard light. So if you see sharp shadows on the ground, you can put hard light with hard light, and it looks natural, right? Because you're in a hard light situation. So when you see sharp shadows on the ground, oh, it's hard light. I don't really like, I need maximum strength in my one little flash that I got. I can't diffuse it. I'm just going to use hard light and hard light, and you'll be fine. Here's the situation here. It looks fine because it's hard light with hard light. Okay, so now let's talk about soft light. What does soft light look like? How do you create it? And when do you create it? Well, this is soft light, right? Soft light has no shadows or a smooth transition between the highlight and shadow. Now look at the highlight and shadow that's on her face, right? Do you see a hard line between the light and the shadow side of her face? Or what about the shadow that the hand is creating across her body? Are those lines soft or are they sharp? They're very soft, right? So now you know that you're in a soft light situation here. And that's, in general, portraits look beautiful with soft light. And that is the magic to a great portrait, is creating soft light, which you have to learn how to do. Okay, so look at here, soft light on my subject. Okay, and you can see soft shadows. Look at under her chin there. That shadow is very, very soft and not sharp. And so how do you create soft light? Well, you need a large light source, okay? And so you need to use a softbox or an umbrella that's at least 30 inches or larger. And then you need to move that light as close as possible to the subject to make it bigger relative to your subject. And if you can, use the edge of the softbox and not the middle of it, because the edge of the light is going to produce the most softest light and the most even light. And so if you can just tweak that light off a little bit and use that edge of that light, it's going to be even softer, okay? So here it is. You've been waiting a long time, and I know this is almost at the end of the lecture, but this is the magic formula on how I create my images. You must have a diffuser that's at least 30 inches large, 3 feet from your subject. And I call it the 3x3 rule, right? 3-foot diffuser, right? So when you go into Samys this week, you need to get some sort of diffuser or softbox that's at least 30 inches. I like, like an umbrella is 33 inches. So I just say 3 feet, so around 36 inches or a little bit less is cool. That big, that's what you need. And you needed to put it 3 feet next to your subject, and you're going to get that magic shot. And that's how I do all my portraits. That's all it is. And you can just use one standard flash and do this particular setup. So you use soft light when you're in a soft light environment. So if you look in your environment and you don't see a lot of hard shadows, you have to use soft light because it makes it look believable, right? And so you could even use soft light in a hard light situation and it looks amazing. That's when you're really going to look professional, is when you do that. Okay. And so here's soft light in a soft light situation. I'm putting this is just a standard flash going through like a shoot through 33-inch umbrella. And look at the soft light it's creating on my subject, but I'm in a soft light situation. We're in Hawaii here. This is in the Pearl Harbor aviation airplane museum that we got to shoot in, and that wrench is really heavy. They use that wrench to work on the airplanes. I don't know what for, but it was huge. Okay, but look at the soft light. I'm in a soft light situation. I'm going to put soft light on my subject. Then here, now you can see the sun is behind her. Now I changed the sky, so it's not really. So I'm just going to tell you that. But look at the shadow. The light is behind her, and look at the shadow by her feet. Do you see a soft or sharp line there? You see a sharp shadow, right? You know I'm in a hard light situation. But now look at the shadow to the right, which I used to create my own light. You see that edge is a lot softer, right? And so I'm using a soft light in a hard light situation, and it gives you that professional look. Now, if you're going to do a full-length shot like this, sometimes I have to have my light more than 3 feet away from my subject. And so in this particular case here, I had to put 2 flashes together on full through an umbrella because I'm more than 3 feet away. And so, you know, that's why maybe you might want to consider some of these hybrid flashes when you go into Samys, you know, like the 8200, 8400, and that's going to give you plenty of juice to do something like this. So if you're doing more full-length shots and you're more than 3 feet away and you're putting a diffuser on it and you want to do shots like this, you got to consider using more power in your shots. Okay, so when a flash fires through a diffuser like this umbrella right here, you are losing 2 stops or 75% of its strength. So if a flash was on full power and you fire it through an umbrella, the strength of that flash is as if you put it on 1/4 power. It's a lot less. So if a flash is at 100%, then when you diffuse it, it becomes 25%. So that's why you need at least 1 flash or even something stronger, because you want to create that soft light, which takes great portraits. And if you're in bright light and you're more than 3 feet away, you're going to need that extra juice. Now, in this situation here, if you put it through a softbox, sometimes it has 2 diffusers. So if you have it go through 2 diffusers, then you're only using 6% of the power. If it's on, you know, full, it's now at 1/16 the power going through 2 diffusers. So maybe that's why you should get a 600-watt flash if you want to do some real damage. That's why I have one, because sometimes I just need a lot of extra power and I can make these buttery silk soft images, putting them through diffuser, double diffusing them, larger diffusers, and creating great light. So to sum it up, folks, and then we can ask a few questions here. With one light, shadows create depth and shape. You want to, great photos is highlight shadow. That's what you need. And so using one light will enable you to create a highlight and shadow situation on your subject. Size matters, right? So you're going to have to use a light that a diffuser and make it larger. If you make it larger, it looks softer. The shadows on the subject is softer, and it's great for portraits. If you make the light smaller and you want to make it look like hard light, then you make it smaller. But size does matter in the type of light that you use. You need to learn how to diffuse the light to make it softer, and we talked about that. We talked about the distance, right? And so we said the magic formula was 3 by 3, a 3-foot diffuser and 3 feet from your subject. That's the magic to all my shots. When you see a lot of portraits, that's what I'm using. Okay. And then that's a 3 by 3 rule. And then believability. So if you're in a soft light situation and you put hard light on your subject, it might not look cool because it doesn't match up. So that's why when people use on-camera flash, people don't like it because it looks flashy, because you're using a real small light source in a soft light situation, because indoors you usually don't see a lot of hard shadows around when you're indoors, right? And so you want to make it believable. So if you're in a soft light situation, you need to put soft light on your subjects. If you're in a hard light situation, you can put hard light on your subjects, or you can put soft light on your subjects in a hard light situation. And that is the secret sauce to really make your photos look professional, because soft light is king. Okay, just remember that. Okay, so for one light portraits, you got to set your background first. Use the 3x3 rule. You need to put shadows on your subject. So if you fire your flash and you don't see any highlight and shadow on your subject, then you need to move that flash more over to the side. Remember, you have to put the nose to the light. And if you don't do that, I can show you this. Oops. Oh, shoot. One of the batteries came out now. Oh, well, we're near the end. Sorry, you're going to have to see. So if I turn I know the light is coming this way, right? So if I turn my nose away from the light, this is going to be dark. So you always have to have that nose towards the light. So why? Your eye goes to what's brightest and what's sharpest. And if the face isn't bright, then you're going to have to do all this photoshopping, and sometimes it doesn't look natural and it looks terrible, right? And so if my nose is over here, well, although I have a light over there, can I turn that off for 1 second here? Yeah, let's see if I can turn that off. Okay, right? So let's say you take a picture and my nose is over here like this. Oh man, you got to do a lot of photoshopping over here. But if the nose is right here towards the light, you can see that the brightest part is right here. Is that correct? Okay, so catch lights also creates great shots. So that's a summary there. If you actually love this and you want more, I'm giving a free class to everybody. You just go to scottrobertlimphotography.com and you can sign up for your online free webinar that starts every 5 minutes if you really like what I'm doing here and you want a little bit more of it. But anyways, I have time for some questions. I'm going to turn it and stop sharing here. Maybe I can get the chat on. And if anybody has any questions, I'd be happy to answer it. It could be related to gear. It could be related to anything.
Hey, Scott.
Lenses. Yes.
All right, let me go. Fine. Okay. When shooting outdoors, especially at sunset and blue hour, do you use gels to bring back proper skin tones?
No, because here's my philosophy on it. If I have white light on my subject, for example, if I turn off all the light here, see, this is white light. See how my skin tone looks good here? So as long as I got white light on my subject, then I don't really care what the background looks like, and I can always change that later in post. And so for me, the concern is I just need white light on my subject, and I'm shooting so fast, and it seems like every portrait I take, I only have a few seconds to do it. And so it's just faster for me. I put white light on my subject and I worry about the other stuff later. But as long as the skin looks beautiful, I'm all good. Okay.
All right.
So
Then I have a question about
good question.
The photo with Tristy. Where was the light placed in the image at the Pearl Harbor when Tristy was with the big wrench?
Oh, okay. That was above, higher. And I think it was camera left on that. So I could go back to that.
Yeah, if you don't mind.
Let me share that. And let's go back to that photo of Tristy right here. This one here. Okay. Yep. Yeah. So let's look at the shadows. So in where she's looking, right? Oh, here's how you know. What do I always say? Nose to the what?
Light.
Nose to the light. So that's where the light's going to be. I mean, if you look at 99% of my photos, you're going to know where the light, generally, not 99, but maybe 90%, right? And so that's generally higher and above. And so if I place the light directly in front of the subject, I like to get it higher because I like that light to come down on my subject because it still creates shadows. Like look under her left knee, you can see a shadow there, right? And so you still see subtle shadows. You still see a shadow like under her chin. So you know that light's a lot higher.
All right, I have another question. What are the difference between an umbrella and a softbox octabox in terms of looks? In terms
you
of
need
looks?
both. So when you go to Samy's today, because what happens is you can get away with an umbrella. Let's take it, for example, this shot here. Okay, I'm using an umbrella here. Now, the reason why I use an umbrella is the umbrella puts soft light on my subject, but it bounces light everywhere. But because I'm outside and there's no walls to bounce the light back on my subject or to create funky reflections or anything like that, then I don't need to control the light because I'm outdoors. And so a lot of times if you're shooting outdoors, I just use an umbrella because I don't care if that light bounces all around because I'm outdoors. But if I'm indoors and I'm in a confined location, I want a softbox. See here, outdoors, that light is bouncing and it's hitting back here too. But do I care? I don't care that that light's hitting back there too, because I'm firing right here. But if I was indoors, that light might be hitting there and then bouncing back on my subject. And so that's why I might want to cover this whole thing up and use a softbox. So I don't know if I have a picture of a softbox here that I used. So if you go to, where is it? Oh, no, actually, yeah, I was doing okay, so let's go to a softbox here. Yeah, here's a softbox right here. Okay, so when I'm using a softbox, that light is just coming down on my subject, but it's not leaking through here. And so you're controlling the light. So if you're so that's why when you're shooting indoors, I have to use softboxes because I don't want the light coming off the side, bouncing off the side of the wall and reflecting back on my subject because I want to control all the light and how it looks on my subject. And I don't want this stray light coming now. Sometimes the stray light looks good, but sometimes you don't want that effect and you want to control it. And so that's why I use a softbox. That's why you need both. And so now I have both. I have softboxes and I use umbrellas because I don't know when I'm going to shoot indoors too. So, and in general, I just very, very, very slightly, a softbox will kind of wrap the light around your subject a little bit better. And so you get a little bit better, softer transition between highlight and shadow with a softbox because that light is being bounced behind the softbox and then forward and kind of channels around your subject. So generally, that's why you wanted the difference between an umbrella. Does that answer your question?
I think so, but I do have a follow-up question.
Yes.
With the umbrellas, the difference between a silver umbrella and a white umbrella, when would you use a silver versus a white?
Good question. Man, I like these questions. Man,
there's about 10 or 15 more. So
let's do it. I love it. That means they're engaged. Okay.
Yep.
I never use the silver side of the umbrella. It just looks a little bit too crispy for me. And maybe if I was shooting a lot of maybe fashion with funky makeup and you know colors, and I wanted a beauty dish look, then maybe I would go to a reflector. But I'm always about creating soft light, so I always use a that's a good question. I use a translucent umbrella and I shoot through it. Okay, so that's when I just shoot through, and that way I can get the light closer to my subject, right? Because if I flip the umbrella around and I'm using the reflector, that light is farther away from my subject and I can't get the softer look. But if I shoot through it, I could get that light literally 3 inches from my subject if I want to, right? And still cut it out from my camera. So that's why I can get the light closer when I shoot through, and I use translucent to give me that soft look.
All right, I have another question.
Let's go.
How would you know to use a speed light versus a strobe? Because they're basically asking smaller versus larger flash. So speed light versus a strobe.
Speed light I use when that's all I got, but I know its limitations, right? So if I'm using a small speed light, I just told you the limitations. You can only use it if you're in bright sun. You can only use it like 6 feet away at full power. Or if I'm diffusing it, I have to get 3 feet away. Now, And so I'm somewhat limited. So if I know, okay, so good question. So if I know I'm shooting in bright light, I'm going to probably pack my 8200, 8600 with me because I need some extra juice. And a lot of times I'm shooting with a class and we have to share the lights. I have to make sure I have enough juice for everybody too. But generally I'll do that. But if I'm shooting at night, and I need a few extra flashes because I want to create a gel look behind my subject or something like that, or I need a rim light, I'll just bring a small flash. The big, huge Hunkin flash is overkill because you saw, okay, I'm going to show you right now. If you go to my chart and you're shooting at night, right? If I'm shooting at night, what's the flash power? Like if I put my ISO to 400, I'd have to be at 1/256 power with my flash. And some flashes, and then the bigger the flash that you use, the 1/256 flash on a bigger flash versus a small flash is like 1/16 power. It's a lot more, right? And so it depends when. So if you're shooting at nighttime, you just need small flashes. But if you're shooting in bright light, then I would get the big guns.
Okay, another question about grids.
Grids, yes.
Does using a grid help when shooting outdoors?
To me, not really. It's kind of negligible. It will create more of a defined line between, you know, the highlight and the shadow. But if you're shooting outdoors and you're letting a lot of ambient light in, then you're not going to notice it that much. I think it's kind of important for indoors because you want to narrow that light on, you want to just get it right on your subject and narrow it. And sometimes it kind of leaves a funky catch light too, depending on how close it is to, and not if a person doesn't have glasses, but if a person has glasses and sometimes you use a grid and it's really close to the subject, it kind of, the catch light's a little bit funky. But a grid, I don't use a grid too much. If I did, it would be indoors. Good question.
Let's just continue a little bit with the umbrellas. This question is on umbrella usage. Do you only use them to shoot through rather than as a reflector? And I just want you to give kind of a...
Yeah, okay, shoot through because I could get the light closer to the subject. I could literally get the umbrella right here to the subject. But if I flip the umbrella around, that stem is going to get in the way, right? So the stem is right here, but the light is way over here now, right? Because the stem is here. So if I turn it the other way around and I shoot through it and I like that look, then it's this close to my subject. And so you want to get that light as close as possible to your subject to get that soft look. And so that's why I don't flip it around the other way.
When do you use ND filters when using a flash, Scott?
You use ND filters when, well, mostly when you shoot video, but when you're using photography, because let's say you're using an older flash system. Let's say you had these old flashes in your garages that you wanted to use or something like that, and it doesn't have high-speed sync. You're going to be in bright light, right? So if you're at f/16, you have to be at ISO 100, shutter speed 100, and your shutter can't go over 200th of a second. And so that's why if you wanted to use a higher shutter speed with an old manual system and wanted to use a low f-stop, you need to put like some sunglasses over your lens, right? So if you know the exposure triangle, so you could, if you lower your f-stop, you're letting more light in, right? So how do you reduce that light with keeping your shutter under 200th of a second? You have to reduce that light by an ND filter. So you use the ND filter when you have an old school lighting system. So maybe you start off with a very, very basic manual system, which doesn't have high speed sync. Then you're going to need an ND filter if you want to do low f-stop shots in bright light, which I used to do all the time. Now, if you have a Sony camera, it makes it easy to use an ND filter because you see your exposure before you shoot it.
What's your secret recipe for portrait shoots when the sunset is in the background? How do you how would you expose for that?
Can I get a question after you're done with this one?
Sure.
Yeah, but we do
Okay.
have looks like 17 questions going.
You're reading the question from the chat.
Questions from the
yeah.
peanut gallery come later.
But
Okay, so what
that's
you
fine
do-
since you're bold enough to come out.
Okay.
So what you do here is you set your background first, right? So let's say I'm in this situation. I want my sky to look beautiful in camera because I can't light the sky. It's too far away, right? So that's why that first rule, set your background first. So whatever you want, so you have to mimic the sunset that you see or envision. So you set the background first, your subject is most likely going to be dark, and then you fill in the brightness on your subject with your flash. Make it really easy, okay? So set your background first. Your subject is dark. So let's go back to this basic thing, okay? You set your background first. Let's pretend that that's a sunset. So you get the exposure however you want it to look in camera, okay? Your subject, because the sun is behind your subject, your subject's going to be dark. So you have to use light to brighten your subject up. And so you just bring your light in. And if your subject's not bright enough, make your light brighter, move the light closer to her, right? And so this is if you're in manual mode with your flash, with your camera. So I'm suggesting you do this all in manual mode so that when you have your light, you can control it, right? If you have an auto mode, then your camera is going to compensate for whatever light that you change. So if you put it all in, so you set your background, I should have said this in the beginning, set your background first in manual mode. So you manually controlled your f-stop, your shutter speed, and your ISO. Get it lined up exactly the way you want, like that background. Most likely your subject's going to be dark. And if you're at sunset, you can pretty much probably use a video light. But if you use whatever light you do, you just bring in the amount of light that's needed. I don't know if I have it on this lecture here, but I could show you exactly. I have a shot just like that. Maybe I have it in my photos here.
While you're looking up that, Dave DeMott, I'd like you to chime in about the special EDU program since the.
Yeah, do it.
Absolutely. Let me get back on here. I didn't want to interrupt you with my.
No. I'm cruising through everything.
No problem. We wanted to share with everybody that as a special thank you for participating tonight, Sony is offering an additional discount program just for you. So
wow.
In addition to all the current instant savings and bonus rebates that Sony is offering nationally for participating tonight, you're going to get an email from us with a website specifically to go to get an education additional discount rebate on from Sony directly. So once you make your purchases of the cameras and lenses and apply for all those instant savings and rebates, you'll get an additional anywhere from 5 to 20% back on top of it all directly from Sony on various cameras, lenses, and accessories. And there are hundreds of items in this program from Sony right now that qualify. So watch for a thank you email. Some of you may have already gotten it a little earlier, but they're going out tonight and tomorrow. And there's a Sony special website. You log in, you have to upload your the email you got from us saying that you took the class, and fill out the information, and they will process it for you and send you a confirming email as a special thank you for joining us tonight. So thank you very much. And I'll turn it back over to Marcus and to Scott.
All right, we're gonna go for another 11 minutes. So I'm gonna muscle through these questions.
Sure.
And just to let everyone know, Dave DeMott is maybe first to hear this too, but Scott's gonna be doing a 10-part lecture series over the next 20 weeks, starting in January, once we get the official thing up on Samys.com. So you can get more of Scott. And so let me get through.
Sweet.
All right, here's one.
Thank you, Scott.
Advantage.
So here's the sunset situation,
yeah,
right?
go ahead.
So if you set for the exposure and you want that sun beautiful, your subject's most likely going to be dark like this. So then you just bring your light in to light your subject. Okay, and so that's kind of like how it works. Here,
That
I
looks-
didn't use the light. I just did a silhouette.
That looks like Claudia. It
Yeah,
is. An
exactly.
advantage of an octo versus a square softbox.
It's just basically, you know, a square, you could maybe control it for more, depending on how you want to control your light. I generally use Octa boxes because they're just doing round light. And so generally that's all I use. But maybe if you're trying to do more of a strip light effect or more side lights, then probably a rectangle light would work better if you're doing a lot of side light. Yeah, but if you, and it's mostly for studio kind of stuff. But generally Octa boxes is generally what I use when I'm on location.
Okay, do all these settings.
You know what? It's like, I used to think like that stuff totally mattered, but not really. Because once you start to know light, as long as you got a softbox, you can make it work. Whether you got an octabox or whether you got just a regular rectangle softbox. Now, those things might make your job easier depending on what you want to do and what kind of effects. But in general, when you're first beginning, it's not going to matter too much. And if you're shooting a lot on location, it's just easier to have things that are round. It's just, you know, I don't know. It's just more convenient to carry and all that kind of stuff.
Does your flash card, you know, your little business card with the flash settings, does
Yeah.
that work work the same from location to location?
It works everywhere in the world. Like just, if it's just measuring the one small little flash, okay? So like if you're using more than one flash or using a different type of flash that's more powerful, then you're gonna have to adjust accordingly. But yeah, it's just for a standard small flash that works for.
I have a question on high-speed sync. They heard high-speed sync is either bad for the camera or the flash. What's your thoughts on using high-speed sync, or why you would use high-speed sync, Scott?
I didn't put it in here because it would be too long. High-speed sync is fine for the camera. That's not an issue. High-speed sync, what it does is it really works the flash real hard because it fires it many, many times within a millisecond. And so that's why often you can run for 10 minutes on a typical flash in high-speed sync, and then it will have to cool down. And so that's why some people get, another reason why people use bigger flashes, because it won't overheat as much. So that's the only drawback with high speed sync, is you can't overwork. If you're kind of, okay, if you're this shooter, click, 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 click. If you're one of those that just constantly click, 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 oh my gosh, you're gonna flash. You got to learn how to just relax and take less shots, because one, your flash won't recycle fast enough. On a typical flash, even if you get a lithium battery in a flash, it takes 1 to 1.5 seconds for it to recycle. So if you go click, click, the first shot will have a flash, the second will have no flash. So, you know, you have to just be mindful of that. So you have to learn how to shoot using a flash and realize that you can't go click, click crazy with it. And sometimes, you know, when I'm shooting with, that's why sometimes I like constant light, because I can put it at 10 frames per second and just like let my subject go wild. But with a flash, you have to worry about recycle speed. And so that's why you can't go crazy with it. And then especially if you're using high speed sync, you're already working it real hard because you're making it fire many times as that shutter is going up the sensor. And so like you can work it hard for 10 minutes or less and it's going to overheat on you. And so you're 10 minutes in your session and then you got to wait for it to cool down, or maybe you have another one in your back. So maybe that's why you should go to Samy's and buy a few, just in case you go high speed sync crazy, then you have extras.
All right, the last thing I want you to do, Scott, is check your phone. I just text you something. Can you read and give these the last students that are here just a quick overview of what you're going to be doing with Samy's over that those 10 classes?
Okay, so basically I am
I sent it to
Samy's
your
and
phone.
yeah, we are working together and I'm putting up a 10 course master class. And I'm going to do 10 lectures and I'm going to try to cover, and I can't cover it all, but I'm going to cover all my fundamentals from composition, lighting, to posing, to post-processing. So these 10 classes are going to cover 1, how to wow, right? Mastering your camera basics, right? How to use the prime lens, how to create impact with your composition, how to use natural light, how to use continuous light, how to use flash, and we can get deeper into this. Posing a female, posing a male. Then also with post-processing, introduction to creating the great workflow with your computer and your laptop, and how to use introduction to Lightroom and the processing that you can do in Lightroom. And then what I feel that's real important is how to skin retouch, right? And those are the 10 lectures that I'm going to be doing for Samys, and it's going to not cost them anything at all. Is that correct, Marcus?
It's free, guys. So
Oh my
another
gosh,
reason why
free.
you need to support your local camera store.
Yes.
Have a deal, free.
Is Amazon giving these free classes to you? No. Is Samy's? Yes. You see that?
Yep.
That is the reason why you got to support your local camera store.
All right, I'll let
Samy's.
Dave DeMont close it out.
Okay,
great.
Dave.
Well, say-
You want me to? Let me stop the sharing.
Not necessary. We're just going to quickly say for everybody who hung out till the end here, thank you so much for joining us. Marcus and Scott, thank you for an incredible evening. We appreciate what you share, and your insights and your capabilities are just off the chart, Scott. So thank you so much. Thank you everybody for listening. A reminder again, Sammy stores are open. We're open following social distancing protocols for in-store shopping. We have touchless curbside pickup available for those who are interested in that. And we're always open 24/7 on Samys.com for all your holiday purchases and your requirements and needs. So thank you all very much. Check back with us over the next few days. We've got a lot more classes during the PhotoSchool holiday education event, and have a great holiday. See you soon.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.